My assessment is that Ukraine will have liberated Crimea by the end of summer, by August of 2023. I don't know how much of the Donbass will still be partly occupied. I think that most of the people that live in those so-called separatist territories actually would prefer to be part of Ukraine versus Russia. But the key, the decisive terrain, if you will, is Crimea. Ukraine will never be secure as long as Russia still illegally occupies part of Crimea. So I believe that by the end of summer, Ukraine will have achieved that. It's too early to plan a victory parade, and there certainly is going to be many months of hard fighting between now and then. The Russians will continue to go after civilian targets in hopes of extending this conflict for the purpose of causing us to lose our will. But I don't think that's going to happen. We know that war is a test of will, and clearly the Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian people have superior will to the Russian population and Russian soldiers. So it's a matter of logistics. And the Russian logistics system is very fragile. It's under enormous pressure. The Ukrainian General Staff is doing a very good job pounding away at Russian logistics and what we call the lines of communication, the main supply routes. There's only two roads that lead into Crimea. One is over the Kerch Bridge, which is already severely damaged. And then there's the so-called land bridge that runs through Mariupol and Melitopol. And the Ukrainians hit an important bridge in Melitopol yesterday or the day before. So they're already damaging, disrupting the two land routes that lead into Crimea. And to me, Crimea increasingly looks like a trap for Russian forces. We've talked about the importance of making sure that Ukraine does not lose, that Russia does not win, but it seems to me that we have stopped short of declaring exactly what the final strategic objective is, which should be total restoration of Ukrainian sovereignty over all of its territory, including Crimea, return of deported Ukrainians, especially the 200,000 Ukrainian children who have been kidnapped and taken to Russia. Those kind of things should be clarified. It's hard to imagine that we would get back to business as usual with Russia anytime soon, certainly not with the current leadership that's in place and most of the other sort of well-known faces there in the Kremlin. We don't know what will happen once Russia has been defeated. I think that there certainly is a lot of informed analysis that's looking at the possibility of either a breakup of the Russian Federation or some change of who's in charge there. I'm not advocating for any of that, but I think we have to be open-eyed and think about the possibilities and the implications. But put that aside, I can't imagine that it would be business as usual, within a few weeks or months after the conclusion of this conflict. There will always be a Russian state. Of course there will, and there should always be a Russian state. And we will need to work with them for all the big issues that are important to us now. But I think the emphasis needs to be on protecting the international rules-based order, which includes respect for boundaries, respect for international law, respect for human rights. And we also need to focus on getting Ukraine back up on its economic feet, because we need to get the millions of refugees back home to Ukraine. And we also need to help Ukraine start producing grain and exporting grain again that is needed for millions of people in Africa and Asia. I was at the International Criminal Court back several weeks ago, and I am confident that they are doing a lot of hard work right now building cases for war crimes by leadership from the Kremlin, specifically for these deportations of Ukrainian children, genocide, and the daily attacks on power grids and civilian targets. These are all war crimes, and so I can't imagine. I would be shocked if after this conflict ended, that we saw for Foreign Minister Lavrov or President Putin or any of the other current leadership team showing up at being welcomed at international events. It would be a betrayal, actually. I mean, all of these people are going to be, I think, investigated and charged with war crimes. I mean, based on what they say publicly and what we're all watching every single day. So I'll be interested in tracking that. On the reparations front, certainly I think there's going to have to be some responsibility by Russia to help pay for the rebuilding of Ukraine. But I always have a little bit of a problem with reparations, because usually, as we saw after the First World War and the Second World War and in other wars, those reparations can have a negative side as well. The fact that Poland today is asking for 1.3 trillion euro reparations from their NATO and EU partner Germany is a manifestation of that. So I'm more focused on the war crimes than I am on reparations, but certainly Russia would have to bear some of the costs for rebuilding Ukraine. We've learned a lot, or been reminded about what's required for sustained land combat. The ammunition consumption specifically, the numbers of casualties, the losses of vehicles and aircraft, it's astounding. And so all of us are having to retool our defense industries and figure out ways to counter this mass that Russia has employed. We don't necessarily have to match it with mass. In fact, precision can defeat mass as long as you have enough of the precision weapons. And my sense is that we're going to stick with it. Of course, just recently the White House, our reports are coming out of the Pentagon that the White House is going to approve the delivery of Patriot missile defense systems to Ukraine. That's not signed by the president yet, but the fact that that's being released from the Pentagon tells me it's probably going to happen. That is a significant step by the White House, because those are expensive and we don't have many of them. So the fact that the White House is doing that, to me, is a very encouraging sign. And the president has said this. And of course, we're on the backside now of the U.S. midterm elections. He's got strong bipartisan support for continuing this help to Ukraine. And I think the Congress and the administration recognize that this is not just about Ukraine. This is about this international rules-based order. It's about ensuring stability and security in Europe, which is important for American prosperity because our prosperity depends on European prosperity. And then finally, it's about deterrence of China, that the Chinese are watching to see, can we stick together and help Ukraine defeat Russia? In fact, it looks to me that Ukraine has achieved irreversible momentum, that there is no way that Russia can turn that back. And even President Zelensky had said, I don't need troops, I need the tools, the equipment, the ammunition, and so on. And so I think that the path we're on now, as long as the West sticks together and delivers everything that we said we're going to deliver and keep the sanctions in place, this does not have to go to a conflict involving NATO directly versus Russia. But the key will be all of us sticking together. Now, the Kremlin needs the narrative. I mean, they have to be able to explain to their own population why this special military operation has turned into such a disaster for them, because it would be very difficult to say, well, we're getting crushed by Ukraine. So they need to somehow justify what they're doing to their own population by expanding the narrative to say that this is Russia, against NATO.